We are taught to trust the justice system, that it is slow, but ultimately it is fair. But what happens when the system fails? When the men and women sworn to protect justice become the architects of your ruin? The nightmare of a wrongful conviction doesn't just imprison one person. It sentences an entire family to years of fighting for a truth no one wants to believe. Welcome to Fights for Fairness on Voices Unlocked. I'm Alex. Today, we speak with Chloe, whose family spent a decade sacrificing everything to free her brother, Michael, who was wrongly convicted. Chloe, thank you for sharing the decade-long fight to reclaim his freedom and your family's life.
Thank you. 10 years. 10 years of holidays spent on prison visiting room floors, 10 years of debt, doubt, and the constant, crushing burden of knowing my brother, Michael, was behind bars for a crime he simply did not commit. He was convicted based on flawed eyewitness testimony and an overworked, under-resourced public defender who barely looked at the case. The day the jury read the guilty verdict, I felt the state didn't just lock up my brother, they locked up my entire future, too.
Let's establish the context of the conviction. What was the core piece of evidence used against Michael, and what was the systemic flaw that allowed the injustice to occur?
The core evidence was a single, traumatic identification by a witness who was heavily medicated at the time. There was no DNA, no physical evidence. The systemic flaw was twofold: a jury that was swayed by police presentation rather than facts, and the simple, brutal truth that justice is priced. We were poor. We couldn't afford the legal power necessary to counter the state's narrative. Once the state labels you a criminal, proving you are not takes decades and millions of dollars.
The fight required your entire family to unite and make sacrifices. Detail the financial and emotional toll. What did you have to give up to keep the legal fight alive for 10 years?
We sacrificed everything. My mother sold her house, the only asset she had to pay for the first round of appeals. My father took on 2 extra jobs, working 80 hours a week just to cover the commissary and visiting expenses. I postponed my college degree for 5 years to manage the case documents and coordinate with the nonprofit legal groups that eventually took us on. We traded stability for hope. The hardest emotional toll was the social isolation. Friends drift away when you become the family with the convicted brother.
Many wrongly convicted individuals rely on nonprofit organizations for help when legal costs become insurmountable. Describe the moment you connected with the Innocence Project, or a similar entity, and how their involvement changed the dynamic of your battle.
It felt like being pulled out of quicksand. When the Innocence Project agreed to take on Michael's case, we finally had the resources, the expert investigators, the time, and the dedicated legal muscle that we had lacked. They didn't treat Michael as just a file number. They treated him as a human being. Their involvement allowed us to retest old evidence and, crucially, find the true perpetrator who had been overlooked in the initial rush to judgment.
Take us to the courtroom on the day the judge finally overturned the conviction and ordered Michael's release. What did that moment of absolute vindication feel like?
It was a silence louder than any scream. When the prosecutor finally stood up and said the state was vacating the conviction, my mother just slumped. It wasn't relief, it was a physical collapse of 10 years of tension. Michael, who had taught himself to show no emotion, just cried. I'm free. But the vindication is incomplete. The system admitted its error, but it cannot give back his 20s, his career, or the years he missed with his nephew. Vindication is not restoration.
This brings us to the crucial question. What happens after the exoneration? What are the immediate psychological, financial, and logistical challenges facing someone who has spent a decade unjustly imprisoned?
The psychological challenge is immense. You are an adult who is taught to function in a controlled, regimented environment. Everything is overwhelming. Smartphones, traffic, choices. Financially, you are left with nothing. Even with compensation, it doesn't arrive immediately. Michael had no social security number, no credit history, and a decade gap on his resume. We had to teach him how to use an ATM. The system that stole his life simply opens the door and says, "Good luck catching up to the world we ran away with."
Focusing on the long-term goal and the advocacy work. Looking forward, what is your family's mission now? How do you ensure that Michael finds a sense of purpose and stability after such an egregious loss of time?
Our mission is twofold. First, helping Michael find purpose. He's now mentoring other exonerees, using his experience to help them navigate the paperwork and the trauma. Second, advocacy. We are lobbying for better state compensation laws and mandatory reentry support for the wrongly convicted. My brother may have lost 10 years, but he can use that time to ensure the next person who walks free is not abandoned. We fight so that the next family doesn't have to sell their home to buy the truth.
Chloe, your family's resilience is an extraordinary testament to unconditional love and the relentless pursuit of justice. Thank you for sharing Michael's story. You've been listening to Fights for Fairness on Voices Unlocked. Join us next week when we discuss